later, they won't miss much. So we can get started.
Great. Rock and roll.
All right. Well, welcome. As Michelle said, I'm Sandy DeWald, and I'll be the instructor today for the workshop. This is going to be a full 2 hours. So there's a little break about an hour into it, about halfway through, maybe a 5-minute break if you need to grab something to drink or take a few minutes and come back. Or I'll stay here through that time and answer questions. But it's going to be a lot of information coming at you for the next 2 hours. So we're going to focus on generative AI, and we're not going to go into, if we have time at the end, we'll go into like Chat GPT and we can actually do some prompts and we can, actually see how it works. But the key thing about generative AI is understanding the foundations and how it works. And so you can put the best information in to get the best information out. So first I'm going to couple some housekeeping. And like Michelle said, feel free at any time to interrupt me. You can just come off of mute and interrupt me. It won't bother me. It won't throw me off track or anything. Like that said, or you can put it in the chat in the Q&A. Those are kind of hidden on my screen right now when I present, so I may just kind of wait and check those at that break time. But again, I have no problem with you just coming off the mute and interrupting me, because I'd rather have you ask the question at the time if there's something that needs to be clarified on a specific topic or a specific screen, and you see like a point, you're like, what is that again? Or you can just save those questions for kind of that break time in the middle. So couple housekeeping. First, is this your first workshop with SCORE, or if you've taken other ones? I don't know if you know about the SCORE, how the structure works in the organization. So there's the SCORE Nashville, and there's SCORE National. So the SCORE National organization has like over 10,000 volunteers. There's over 300 chapters. We're the Nashville chapter. We're all volunteers. Michelle's a volunteer. If you see Gordon on the attendees, he's one of our mentors and volunteers. So it's an entire network of people that really are volunteering to give back time to help people getting their businesses started or different stages in their business journey. The key thing about SCORE is that we are a nonprofit. We're a separate organization, but we work alongside the SBA, or Small Business Administration. Again, we're not part of them, but we provide education and training and mentorship resources to clients that might also be part of the SBA, but we're separate from them. The key thing about, I don't know, does anyone have a SCORE mentor? Maybe you can put that in the chat or Q&A, depending on your status as a panelist or not. If anyone has a mentor today, like Gordon is one of our mentors, fabulous mentor, by the way. But there's 2 different types of volunteers within SCORE. So there's mentors and subject matter experts. A mentor is really like your business coach. And if you're starting your business journey, I'd really highly recommend that you sign up for a mentor. It's a free resource for you. And again, that mentor is going to have a wide variety of knowledge in many different areas of business. They have a vast experience, and they can provide you like that sounding board, because sometimes you just need somebody to guide, like, what about this or what about this, and check things, and you don't have anybody in your network that you can do that with. That mentor can provide that business coach resource for you. You are still going to be responsible for making the decision. The mentor's not going to say, well, you should do X and you should do Y and you should do this. They're going to say, what have you thought about this or this? And they're going to guide you and counsel and challenge you at times, but it's ultimately your business and your decision. But it's good to kind of have that resource in your corner and kind of that coach that you can go to. Many, many people need coaches in all different aspects of life. And this is just one way a business coach that the mentors can provide for you.
Sandy?
Yes.
Z. Randall said that she does. She has Ed Repune, and I love my mentor.
I love Ed. Sorry, I love them all, but I love Ed too.
Yep. Pam Reeves says, I've utilized a mentor in the past.
Excellent. And you can always reach out. Even if you had a mentor in the past, you can always reach back out to SCORE and either, see if that mentor is still available, because they have a capacity for each mentor, or you can get assigned a new mentor for, going forward. But when you do sign up, make sure you're signing up under the Nashville SCORE mentor, and not so you don't get assigned somebody in Denver. Like, you'd make sure you want to be part of the Nashville mentor, because having somebody local can help plug into local resources for you here in the Nashville area. The other part of SCORE, Nashville and and the national is education and workshops. So the one you're taking today, we have many different workshops that we offer at the Nashville chapter. And then there are also ones that the national organization offers virtually. And so that might be, if you don't see it in your local chapter, you can check the national organization to see if there's a workshop there that you're interested in. We have some that are regular, like every month. We have certain ones that we do, like how to start a business or a business plan, business modeling. And then we have some that are more like every quarter. This one's offered quarterly. Some are offered, every couple of months. Sometimes we have special events. So we're having a pitch session with Powerhouse Partners and Pitch, where people can get up and it's a competition, a pitch competition that you can get up and kind of pitch your business and for money if you win the competition. So that's a kind of an annual event that we do. And then we do some workshops that are kind of, not a regular, but every so often we'll do maybe kind of very targeted ones. Maybe it's cybersecurity, maybe something about legal issues. So those are kind of sprinkled in there throughout the year. Watch the website. And then of course, once you are on our email, since you take this workshop, you'll be getting information about other workshops coming up for the Nashville chapter. So who am I? I am, again, one of the volunteers here at SCORE, but I am what is called a subject matter expert. So I wouldn't be a mentor that meets regularly with you, but I would be somebody that the mentor, like Gordon, would bring in for a specific question on my area of expertise. One of the areas of expertise I consult in with the mentors is product development, product marketing. I've launched over 400 products to market in B2B, B2C, all different markets and segments. So I have quite a bit of experience in pricing products and services, promoting, marketing, and developing new products for market. So that would be, and then I do teach 2 other workshops, a new product development workshop, as well as a pricing workshop based on that experience. And then we've added this generative AI workshop in. So let's get into the meat of it. Let's talk about generative AI and what it actually is and what you hear about it, and then what kind of how it splits out. We're going to cover kind of the general foundational parts of it to understand how it works, because understanding how it works to make sure that you know what's the best use for it and what it's not ideal for. And you'll know when you hear things in the news about, well, it doesn't do this and it does this and it does, then you'll understand why it's doing that, and then how to make sure that you use it properly and get the most out of it versus trying it and then throwing up your hands and saying, oh, it doesn't work. We're going to touch a little bit on some kind of patterns and things that how you input the text into the AI. And then we'll just briefly touch on legal at the end. That's a whole can of worms and could be a workshop by itself, but we're just going to kind of touch on how you can make sure that what's going on legally, because you do hear a lot of stories about that. So there's 2 types of AI. It's all technically generative AI, but we kind of break them down to generative AI usually talks about text. It is a text-based software program that is only you put text in, you get text back out. There's another type of AI is AI generated images. It's still technically all generative AI, because you're generating something, but it's more image focused. Again, you're writing text to prompt the model, but then it's going to bring back an image for you. They're 2 separate. You can't use a text AI to try to get an image, and you can't go into an image AI and then try to get some text out. So you have to make sure you're using the right tool depending on what you want. The models, so the generative AI is to generate content and language. So it learns from patterns and structures. That's where you hear about these large language models. These are huge models that have gone out and trained on vast amounts of text data, content from all different sources, to generate patterns in that language. So it's gonna kind of see what's out there. It's building this model, and then it's gonna be able to replicate that structure. The ones you commonly hear about are OpenAI is the company that has ChatGPT. Google used to be called Bard, now it's called Gemini. Microsoft used to be called Bing Chat, now it's called Copilot. And then the other one's kind of Anthropic, which has a program called Claude. Those are kind of big ones, but there are, I think every time you turn around, there's another one. There's hundreds of these models out there. There's Jasper and there's Grammarly and I mean, you name a model, and they're all going to work similar. So we're not going to get into like how each model works because there's so many, and it could change literally from today to tomorrow. It can change. But we're going to talk about what you need to do, and it'll work for any of these models. So when we talk about this foundation of structure and inputting context to get the right context to get text out, we're going to be, you can apply it to any of the models out there. Let me hit, I got a little pop-up. All right. AI generated images are models again, but they're trained to generate image based on text input, but then they kind of generate a new image. So you can either put an image in and actually have it modify an image based on text, or you can actually have it create and generate a new image. Those examples are your DALL-E, Midjourney, or Stable Diffusion are kind of the big ones. But then you also have Adobe has their own AI. Canva's got an image AI that works within their software platform. So you're seeing a lot more companies integrate, and both of these integrate AI already into their software that you currently use today. This workshop's going to focus mostly on generative AI for a couple of reasons. One, I think it's going to be the biggest bang for your buck. As a small business owner, you need to figure out like what's the most efficient and effective tool I can use. The generative AI is going to give you a quicker return on that learning curve, and it's going to be, I think, more applicable and helpful for your business. And there are some high quality kind of free versions to get started. So ChatGPT, the ChatGPT 3.5 is a free version. The ChatGPT 4 you pay for. So, and the free version on that is really pretty powerful. So you can really have ways to use these tools much easier and simpler and quicker. And then if you're ready to kind of be more advanced, then you can go up to the paid versions. But the free versions are really powerful. The AI generated images, those usually are going to be paid. And again, they're going to be part of a paid program like Adobe Firefly is their version, or Canva. The paid version of Canva has these kind of AI generated tools inside of it. I'm going to say it's not going to be as useful for small business. I think they're great for creatives and people that are trying to develop new artwork or like photography and different skills in that. But the thing with images for a small business is that it's the stock photo. Everyone knows when you're using a stock photo. Everyone kind of knows when you're using an AI generated image. And for your business, as a small business, your images around your company should be tied to your business. They should reflect who you are so people get to know you. If you're constantly using kind of stock images or never showing your face or, then it's kind of like, well, I don't really know you as a business. So that's why I don't think it's that applicable for small business. Can you play around with it and have some backgrounds? Okay. But I can get background, general, just Canva regular photos will probably be fine for a stock image or a background image, or I need a picture of a heart for some social media post. I mean, just use the stock. You don't have to worry about generating an AI image. So we're going to focus mostly on generative AI, the text portion, not the image today. But the thing is changing rapidly. So, they could mash these together at some point. They could make AI images might have something more applicable, because generating AI images also, people don't look quite right yet in them. Usually like the hands and different parts just not quite there yet, but maybe it will be there, and you can actually take your face, put it into AI image and make a very believable image without having to take the picture. But again, we're just going to focus on the generative AI versus AI images. So what is generative AI? And you may just call it Gen AI. I'm hearing GAI as terms that people are using now instead of saying the words generative AI, but they are talking about what's called a large language model, or an LLM. And I actually want to take the word artificial intelligence out and really say that this is augmented intelligence. that the best use of Gen AI is when it's combined with the human. It's not going to replace, it's not you have always extremes of opinions, and usually the truth is kind of somewhere in the middle. So it's a great tool, just like Photoshop's a tool, Word's a tool, Google Docs are a tool. But it's best when that tool is used with the human experience and expertise. When you layer that on top of the AI, that's when you're going to get the most powerful use of the tool. It's a tool, but then you have to add your unique experience and background. It's a great ideation kind of creation tool. So again, it can shortcut a lot of things for you, get you jump started on things, can create first drafts, but it's not going to be the final output. It's not going to replace your input. We'll talk about why, but you still need to add your unique voice, perspective, stories, expertise, experience on top of what the AI creates. Again, it can be standalone like ChatGPT, which is fine, or it can be integrated into other programs. I'm seeing now like LinkedIn has an AI that you can use to help write LinkedIn posts. I mean, some of them are not that great, some of them are okay, but you can either use it within a program that you already pay for. A lot of the programs are offering AI into their paid versions, or you can use like a standalone program like Claude or Google Bard now, Gemini or Copilot. Copilot's paid though. I'm not sure if they have a free version, or like ChatGPT. You interface with the model through prompts, and this is the huge reason. So AI has been around for decades. I mean, every search engine uses AI. Every search of any kind uses AI to kind of sort through data. Anything that's been built on top of a big data set has used artificial intelligence to sift, sort through, make connections, and output that data in a usable format. The key is that we have this layer on top, that interface on top of these models that makes the average person be able to use them versus being a developer and a coder writing the AI and giving it instructions and having it all like secret in the back end and coding language. Now that the average person can input a text prompt and get information back out and use the model. So that's the huge revelation of why we're hearing about generative AI now when AI's been around forever. Because of that interface now is for the average person to use it. I want you to think of Gen AI as an assistant. So if you had an assistant in your business, you still need to provide instructions, you need to provide guidance, you provide clarifications, you review the work, you go back and say, well, it's not quite right, I need you to do it this way. So again, having kind of a really qualified assistant, but it's an assistant to you. It's not going to be, I tell you what to do and it comes back perfectly, but it's going to be an iterative process to work with the AI to get back out what you want. So think of it as a constant kind of conversation with the AI, which sounds weird because you're like, I'm talking to a machine. Yeah, but you are, because you give it information, it brings back something, you're like, well, that's not quite right. Or can you give me 3 more examples? And it comes back, and you ask it again, it comes back. Because it's actually going to be a back and forth. It's not a one and done. It's not going to bring you back the first time, like, here's perfectly what I wanted. It's going to be an iterative process with that AI. So it sounds weird, but you're going to start having conversations. And the joke is, I'd be nice to your AI in the sense of like, use nice language and be very polite, because I've heard stories where people can start telling the AI to be a certain person, and the AI will take on whatever persona you want, but they always just say, hey, be nice to your AI and they'll be nice back to you. The key thing about these models is that they're not going to do exactly the same thing every time. So you and I can put in the same prompt and both in ChatGPT, and we'll get different answers back. We'll get slightly different answers. It may be kind of the same, but there's going to be some differences. Or one time you put it in and it'll give you one response, and the next time you put it in, it'll give you something different. You're like, well, why did it do that? Because again, there's some randomness built. It's built on natural language. We don't say the same thing the same way every single time. Even if we're answering the same question, we'll respond a little differently to somebody the second time or third time we're asked versus the first time. So it's going to give you a little bit of natural language. Some randomness is built into that model. Never going to be perfect on the first time. If it is, that would be highly unusual, but maybe you've dialed the model in really well. But it's again, that iterative process back and forth. It is also backwards looking data. So all the models have a cutoff date. For like ChatGPT, it was September 2021. For some of the newer models, it might be like ChatGPT 4 is April 2023. So they've updated it since then. But none of the models are going to be current models. They're always going to be looking at historical trends or data. So if you had some specific statistic or something that you wanted in the output that is beyond the date of when the model cuts off, you're going to need to provide that information to the model. So if you were writing a blog post and you were referencing a current statistic of in 2024, you'd have to make sure to tell the chat GPT or tell the in the prompt to put that stat saying, please include this stat in the, you know, as you're writing it. So it would know, oh, I won't use some old data that I've been trained on. I'll use this current one that you gave me. So are there a lot of benefits of generative AI? I mean, it's an incredible tool. It is amazing. And when you put stuff in, you're like going, what? When it gives you stuff back, because it's so well trained and it's on such a large data set. And it's amazing how quickly it can kind of come back with some information. The big thing I think for it is to increase productivity for small businesses. You're not starting from the blank page. How many of us have sat there going, okay, I need to generate content, you know, and you're like, well, I don't even know what to write about. Like, what should I, you know, and you know what to write about, but it's just like starting from a blank page or a screen is kind of intimidating. So this can give you that first draft. You can say, hey, I'm thinking of an ideas around this topic for this person or this art audience. You know, what are some 10, you know, key points, or what's a title for a blog post, or, you know, you can kind of get that. You can have it build an outline. You can build a checklist. Like, what are the 10 things I should say if I'm telling somebody about X, you know, kind of getting that feedback. And then you can start building out from that, but it can give you that starting point. And I think that's huge. It can also reduce some tedious tasks. Like, there's some things that you don't need any creativity for. You know, if you just want to, like, you got to create a survey up, write a quiz, if you need to summarize an article, let the tool do that. You don't need to go through and go, oh, here's key point number 1, here's key point number 2, here's key point number 3. You can say, you can input that text into the model and say, summarize this article for me. Or what are the key takeaway? What's the key one takeaway from this article? Instead of having to go through and do that yourself. You can actually have it to write like a thank you email from somebody that buys a product. Like, just have those aren't creative, but you want to make sure, like, what are the key things to put in that? It'll know the template for an email. It'll understand, like, oh, here's the normal things that you would include to make sure you're not missing something. But those things are where it's great for kind of those kind of rote or regular kind of, you know, tedious tasks that aren't really creative, but you can have the model do that for you. The other thing is great too. It can provide an independent check. So it can catch, you can write something and put it in there saying, hey, is this grammar, you know, can you check my grammar and spelling? I know they have that in Word and other programs, but it can also, you can actually ask it to improve the writing. You can say, am I missing any key points? Is this written for an 8th grade level? You know, we talk about sometimes as experts, we tend to put a lot of jargon and things that our audience may not know, but we're so used to saying it that, like, oh, the model you can ask it saying, you know, is there anything technical in here that would be, yeah, not that somebody that's a first time something wouldn't understand. And you can have it check and it can go, oh, well, you're using this term and I probably would use this instead, or you need to spell this out, or you need to kind of say what this is, explain more about this. You know, it's great for that kind of independent check of your writing. The other thing is actually you can identify, which I think is pretty, we'll talk about later about different perspectives. So maybe you have a couple different customers that you sell to. So you might want to write and target things differently. Like, maybe it's some marketing copy, but you might sell to a B2B business and you might sell to a B2C, the consumer, and you have two sides. So you may want to have the model say, here's my marketing copy I'm writing, or website copy. can you make sure that, how would I rewrite this for, a business, someone that's purchasing for a small business versus somebody that's a consumer buying this product. So you can actually ask it for different perspectives, and you can start rewriting things tailored to different audiences. And you can actually ask it to provide you alternatives. You can put input in and say, hey, give me 3 different ways to write this introduction to this work or description for this workshop. You write it, and then it can give you, oh, here's 3 different ways, or give me a good hook for this, workshop description or something like that based on this audience. So you can ask it specific questions and get feedback from the model. And then the other thing is you can really do different versions. So you can say, there's always a regenerate button. So you can give it a prompt the first time, and then it comes back something, well, rewrite this for an 8th grader, rewrite this for a college student, rewrite this for, different audiences. And so it's the same kind of content, the basic prompt, and you're asking it to kind of adjust and give you differences based on the user, or for different platforms, like write this as a LinkedIn post, write this as, a Facebook post, write this as a Twitter, a tweet. So you can actually have it rewrite or take that same content, and we call it repurposing, where instead of having to rewrite it for all the social media platforms, you would ask the AI to do that for you. And then you have it, boom, you can add the graphics and go. Again, you're not having to sit down and actually rewrite, pulling out the key points and knowing, oh, well, how many characters is Twitter right now? I don't know. What's the length that should be on Instagram? It's going to kind of know the format of those platforms and what's the best kind of way to write for those. And it also loves to put emojis in, just telling you, it'll throw some emojis in there, whether you want them or not. So it knows, and it'll put hashtags in there. If you say you're writing for Twitter, it'll put the hashtags it thinks that you need for that post. So it does kind of all that work for you based on, again, its training data. So how does generative AI work? And we're going to talk about it because it's really important to understand how it works, to know when you hear stuff in the media and people go, oh, it doesn't do this or does this, or it came back with this, or it doesn't work, and it's taking over the world, or it's doesn't do anything. It's useless. So you're gonna get all these opinions, and this is going to help you kind of sort through what the truth is, or kind of where it should be, as opposed to kind of hype that's out there. So if you ever wonder what GPT stands for, it's called the Generative Pre-trained Transformer. So this is kind of the back end technology. So the front end, a key thing on the front end side was the input and the interface for the average person to be able to use it. On the back side, what makes this model powerful are these transformers that sit on top of the data. And they are that's what's kind of transforming all that kind of raw data. And if you're a data scientist, I'm so sorry, I'm gonna not explain this as technical as it should be, but basically it sits on top of these big transformers, is coding that sits on top of in the AI. And it understands, it's been trained on like how words work, grammar structure. So it's been trained on language and remembering word order. So just like when we're learning English when we're little kids, this transformer understands context and structure and what comes next and how things put together and what words tend to go together and make sense, and that word order, which is really, really powerful, because it's very hard to learn a language. I mean, we think it's easy because everyone does it, but if you're a kid to learn to the level of, from first learning your first words to, writing at a college level, that's a big learning curve that these models, these transformers sit in the models and can do that, which is really powerful. And it's trained. So how the model works, it's trained on billions of text out there. It creates a probability matrix. So it's not, and that's, we're going to come into the issue of copyright and all that stuff. But what it does is it looks at all these kind of word and how sentences and structures and words work. It creates a probability matrix, and it says, when it responds back to you, it's really just kind of predicting the next word in a sentence. It's predicting the next logical thing that comes based on your prompt in. It's like, well, based on all this out here, I see It's saying most probable thing is X. So it's going to give that back to you. So it learns that human language and pattern and predicts what the next word should be. So it's creating, but not creating. It's not like coming up with unique thoughts on its own. It's actually taking all the model, all the language out here saying, well, based on your question, this is most likely the answer for that. This is most likely the word choice to use. This is most likely predictive based on your input coming back to you of what you want. So it's not creating, it's taking kind of all what's out there and saying, here's the most likely answer for you, which is kind of key. And that's where people are like, oh, it stole my specific language. And you're like, well, it doesn't really pull that specific language and put it in over your output. It uses that language as a structure. It uses that language as a context to build the model. And then it takes all of that and then says it's the most likely response when you do the output. So to kind of clarify that, so if I say in the US anyway, if I say I pledge allegiance to what's the next word everybody goes? Flag. You're going to go, that's because again, your model, our models in our head saying, well, the words I pledge allegiance to, flag usually follows. It's not going to be carrot, it's going to be, that would make no sense. So the models work that way. So if I said Mary had a little, our models say lamb would be the next thing. The large language, we wouldn't say sports car as our most logical next step. So that's what the model is doing. It's saying, based on what you want, here are the most likely words. And again, it's a little bit of magic, I'm saying, how this whole works in the backside. And to train these models, I mean, millions of dollars were spent. It's not like you can just build a model overnight. They are significant investments of time and computing power to train these large language models. So Gen AI is great for some things. It's not good for other things. And people keep trying to use it for other things. And it's like, and then when it doesn't give you the right data, they're like, oh, it doesn't work, because it's really not ideal for certain. It's not ideal for everything. Really good for ideation and brainstorming. So come up with 10 ideas for this, or give me 3 topics for a workshop about X, or, write me 3 different sales emails, about the, or write me some descriptions for this type of product. Like there's many of the ways you can ask it to like kind of brainstorm, give you ideas, give me some titles for X, great for that, because it can actually, sometimes it's going to come something like, it's pretty kind of lame, but it might spark another idea for you. Or you might go, oh, that's a really kind of a good angle I didn't think about with this topic. And then you can build on that. It's great for first drafts. So, saying, hey, write a 1,200 word blog post about X, it's going to write one, but then it'll give you a first draft. It should not be the final draft. It'll be the first draft, and we'll talk more about that later. But it's great at kind of, again, that blank page you're staring at. It gives you somewhere to start, and it's so much easier to kind of add in and edit to something already there versus trying to write the whole thing from the scratch. Great for outlining and lists. You can say, give me the top 10 things about this, or give me, I'm running this workshop. What are the 10 key points? Or like I used it or the other day for, here's the topic for a book. What would be a kind of an outline you would think for a book about this topic for this audience? Great for that. So it kind of gives you that checklist to make sure you're not missing key areas or key points. And then you can, again, build on that from that outline. Summarizing, really good. You can put an article in or put some kind of content in, and then say, hey, just summarize this for me. What are the 3 things, 3 key points or 3 things that were surprising in this article? I mean, ask it. We'll see what it says about what it thought was the most unique thing in that article. But again, it can take a big amount of content and kind of summarize it down for you. Write me a 1 paragraph summary about this art, about this, 5,000 word blog post. Give me a summary a one-page summary for that article. And then that can even be your own article, and you can use that summary for social media and other descriptors.
Sandy,
Yeah.
we have a couple of questions.
Oh, sure.
Carrie asks, should we be inputting the text of an article into ChatGPT or any AI tool? Isn't the author of that article going to mind that the AI is being trained on their intellectual property?
Oh, well, we're going to talk about legal stuff later on. So the inputting the article would be like your own work. If you needed to summarize, you can. So if you're inputting it for summary, and then you're adding a commentary on someone else's article, you would do that same thing in a blog post. You would have to reference back the original article, and you would source that where you came from. You can't take somebody's article and pretend it's your own work, I guess. So I've seen people take like research papers that are pretty dense, pretty big. Again, we'll talk about the limits, the context lengths, but some models, you can put a lot more content in. They'll put the big research article in and just say, hey, summarize this for me. Then they'll take the summary and reference back the original article, but then they kind of build out like, well, here's kind of my review of that article or review of a book. It's the same thing. You always have to reference back to the original source.
And Tara asks, and you've said you're going to address it later, is there a limit on how much content you can enter for it to summarize?
Yes, ma'am. So, or maybe I'm assuming Terry was a girl, but it's all right. Yeah, we're going to get to that on the second half of the workshop. We'll talk about the limitations of the different models and how much you can put in and how much you can get out, and what happens when you exceed that limit, because every model has a limit. Thank you, Michelle.
That's it. Okay, go on.
The other thing is rewriting, editing. So again, you might write something up and then you're like, okay, I need somebody. Like if you had a fact checker or somebody that was not fact checker, but someone's like, an editor, like, hey, here's my, or you may have something like I do a lot where I have a piece from, like I've written things in different parts and pieces, and I'll kind of put those pieces into ChatGPT and say, hey, here's kind of 4 different things I've written at other places, but they were in different posts or different content, but they all kind of talk about the same thing. Put these 4 together and write me a coherent blog post based on these kind of 4 pieces from other things that I pulled it from. So it's really good about that. Or you can have it check your work, like, hey, does this make sense? Is this written appropriately for this audience? Providing that feedback and critique as well. Am I missing something? Is this, is this right for this target audience? Is this even make sense? Like sometimes, or you can actually have it like format, because you can say, rewrite this form or rewrite this content with bullets and bolding and highlights, and you can actually tell it formatting things, and it'll make the content and rewrite it in a more clear and concise manner at times. What it's not good for, it is not a search engine. And the people are using it for that. And it's really, don't go in there and say, give me the capital of whatever. Like, yes, it'll probably give you it, but I love this quote, and I found this from somebody, I wish I could remember who said it, but it said, large language models are language generators, not fact generators. They are not going to be research. They're not going to be for attribution. They're not going to give you sources for stuff. They're not going to be and I've heard this too, where you can ask the model for like, give me the source for this. It might make up a URL. It might make up a source, because it's going to try to provide you something. It's going to answer your question. It's not going to say, I just made it up. No, it's going to say, oh, well, I kind of hear something. And you have to, if you ever ask it for that, check the source that it actually is a real one, and it actually came from where it is. That's a big kind of issue where people are asking it for these models for factual or source and research. Is not what they're there for. They're there to generate content and language, but they're not facts. If you want facts, go to Google, go to Bing, go to wherever, look it up, find the original source, get the fact from there, check it, make sure it's correct. And so that's key that it's not a search engine. People are using it all the time for that. And yes, it probably works, but it's really not the best tool for that. Search engines are the best tool because their models are trained on that specific, and they can bring back those sources and references. It's not a final output. Do not think you can get whatever Gen AI gives back to you is the end all be all, the final thing. You can just copy, paste, and go. Don't do that, because that's where, because I did tell you that Gen AI is a predictive model. It's giving you the most likely. So it's going to give you the, well, I'm not gonna say average, but it's going to give you the most likely response. Well, do you want to be just like everybody else with the most everyone's going to say the same thing. If they all just put in ChatGPT, they're going to kind of all get the same kind of output, right? No, that's where you need to take the draft you get, and then you add your own experiences, stories, client testimonials, challenges. Your expertise has to lay on top of what the model gives back to you. And it's not for long form content. You're not going to, people are worried about ChatGPT, right, or any of the models writing books, and it's all going to be a book written by the Gen AI versus a human. We'll talk about that's where the question about the context will come in. You can make it write sections in a book, but it can't do a whole book, or you can't put a whole book into Gen AI and try to get something back out of it. Or if you're writing one, you can't, it can't do that much content at one time. So it really struggles again with really long form content. We'll talk about content's length and what it's good for, but not good for that. So just some ideas. So these are the ideas on the left that I just talked about: idea generation, outlining, summarizing. You'll get this slide later. Michelle will send, or somebody will send it out. These are just some examples of things you can use Gen AI for. Doesn't matter the model, doesn't matter which one you use. You can, but these are ways that you can start. And again, don't write them down. You'll get this later. But these are kind of ways of things you can ask the model for. Things you like a job description. Like, why do you have to create one for like somebody you're hiring? Have the model do it for you. It'll give you, again, the basics. It'll give you that good starting point, and then you can tailor and add the things in that are specific to your company or your that job for you. You can ask for sales copy for products and services. So have it write website copy, have it write that first draft of sales copy, have it write that first product description, have it write that workshop description. Again, it's a starting point. Again, you can add on to it, and then because something the model's not going to get it right. It's going to go, well, I'm really not going to cover this in the workshop, but I'll kind of cover this. So you can kind of tweak it. But again, it's giving that starting point. I think it's great for repurposing. You already have a blog post, then it's like, why do you have to create the social, give me, 3 Twitter or X, whatever it's called now, post, give me Facebook post, a LinkedIn post, a Instagram idea for an Instagram title or something, whatever it is. You can kind of take that same content and then have it create all the kind of repurposed content off of that, instead of having to think about, no, I got to write these, and I got to write this one. I got to write it differently for Facebook than I do for LinkedIn, than I do for, let the models do that for you. Really great for some things like what be the top 3 questions your target customer might have about X. So those are fantastic. Again, it's not replacing market research where you need to go out and talk to live people, but it can give you some ideas of like, oh, if I was a beginner, what would I think? What would I need to, what would I ask when I'm hiring a caterer for a wedding? What are the 3 questions I should ask? I don't know, so and then you can write articles and blog posts and expand to give information about those top questions that, especially when you're starting out and you may not have any customers yet, you're still trying to learn. Like, the models are going to know kind of what are the most common questions that people ask about this topic, and feed that back to you. So it's great for that kind of research, but not like research where I need to have a fact, a key thing, or source, a reference. That's a different type of research.
Sandy?
Yeah.
Excuse me, got 2 questions.
Yep.
Pam Reeves wants to know, will you provide a listing of prompts?
So we're going to talk about prompt structure, and then we're going to play with some prompts, but the prompts are all So I'll give you a structure, then you can actually kind of plug in your specifics that apply to your business. So yes and no.
Okay, and Anonymous wants to know resumes, LOL.
Yeah, it can actually write, it can write like a really good like summary section for a resume. You could put in your experiences and you can have it like critique, like here's my job that I did. What would be the kind of 4 bullets that you would put on a resume for this job, for this job listing? Yeah, that'd be great. And you could actually, yeah, I would write it for you, the like the summary at the top, and then like each job posting just kind of, and again, it's going to give general answers back, but you may have done something specific at a job, then you make sure to go in on top of it and put tailored, like sometimes on a resume, you want to put, if you increase sales X%, or something like it may say what a sales job would do, general sales manager, but you then want to add on kind of key numbers or key things that are specific to your experience at that job. No, that's a great one.
Okay, back to you.
All right. Good questions. Oh, so really think of AI as an assistant, and anything that you write today, think about how the AI can help you with that, how that model. Yeah. And even if you just play around with it, put it in there and see what it comes back with. And you may go, well, 90% of that I got, but there's one point that I really didn't think about. Let me add that in, so it can give you anything that an assistant can help you with, or anything that you might write. Think about how the AI can kind of help you either check it with grammar, punctuation, formatting, target audience. Is it appropriate? Is it too, for different platforms? I mean, there's all different ways you can use anything you think about writing today. Think how the AI can help you with that. All right, so that's the first kind of break. I don't know if you guys, let me check time out. We're good on time. So I don't know if there's any more questions, or you want to take a 5-minute break, or we can keep going. It's all up to you.
Nobody's responding. You can unmute and talk, guys.
I would say keep going. This is amazing.
Thank you. Is that Tara that said that? I'm looking at, trying to scroll
It
through.
is. It is.
And Tracy agreed.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Well, we're going to get into like, more that was more like the foundation. And now we're going to get into the specifics of how to put prompts in, the patterns, and then how to make, how to think about ways you can use it to get good information back out. Because again, what's the old, I think way back in the 80s, let's just say the 80s and computers, back when people were first like coding in computers, and it was like the old model of garbage in, garbage out. I always think about AI as like, well, yeah, if you put garbage in, you're gonna get garbage out. So when people say, oh, I just got crap from it and it was horrible, it's like, well, yeah, you're probably put in some garbage, because it can do some pretty amazing things. Again, knowing how to put it in to get the right information out.
This is Pam. I have a question.
Sure.
What are your thoughts about having it like ask questions? So I used it to update my website, and I prompted to ask me questions so that it can better understand what it is that I was looking for. So it asked me like 10 questions about my mission, my ideal client, things like that. And then when I responded, and then it prompted, or kind of then gave me the starters of, and then I took it and tweaked it and changed words and things just to make it more my own. But I found that way to be helpful too. So what are your thoughts with prompting it to ask you questions so that it can better understand what you want?
Fantastic. Like that is another key thing. Usually it's a little more advanced where people aren't quite, ready for that, but that's a fabulous use of like asking it to, and that's a common thing you'll see a lot of times is people like, well, ask me, what are the things, it's perfect. If that's a little more advanced, but good job on you, Pam.
Thanks.
And that's something you can do at any time. You can say, well, ask me, what should I know about this? Or how would I do this? And it'll tell you. Again, it'll give you, and again, giving it the context of like, don't just say, how would I write a book? Okay, it's going to give you something, but you might want to say, you know, a little
Right.
more specifics around that.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah, and
asking it
that's what
to,
it was. It was more so like, I want to update my website, ask me 10 questions so you can know my voice or know something about me.
Yeah.
It spit out the questions. I took it, I responded, I put it back in, and then it generated all this information. And so then
Yeah.
I was able to take it and tweak it.
yeah,
But I found it helpful to tell it what you're looking to do.
yes. And we'll
And
talk
then
about
it
that in
will,
the prompts,
yeah.
that you have to give it guidelines, rules, and instructions. And there's a very specific pattern of information that it needs to be able to provide information back to you. So that's fantastic.
Hi, Sandy. This
Yeah.
is Dave. Quick question. Why are these called models? Why don't they just call them platforms or systems?
You would have to ask data science people because they love to use it. So it's actually because it's actually not just like, so a platform is like Facebook. It's a platform that people use in a one way kind of thing. It's not learning, it's an interface, but it's very set and structured. Like this is how you this is how you do a post, and this is where you load it, and this is what you do. So platforms are kind of more rigid and fixed, I guess. And then you have to keep writing code and tweaking that platform to make it do new functions. The models are learning on their own. So it's almost like it's training itself and it's learning itself. So someone's not writing code for it to go out and learn stuff. It's writing the base code, and then the model itself starts going out and learning and then expanding on its own. It's kind of a black box a little bit, which is the problem. People want to know what the code is saying in there, but the model itself learns on its own. It doesn't need somebody to come in and code. Hey, you need to check these 10 references over here, or you need to go look at this over here, or this is a data set you need to pull in. It just goes out and starts looking and bringing that in and learning on its own. No one has to write the sentence structure. By all the data it sees, it figures out what that sentence structure and grammar structure and language structure should be that it's being trained on. So it's different. And it's probably a little more, like I said, it's a little more the data science people and how they talk about these things as being models versus platforms. But if you want to call it a platform, that makes more sense to you to think about it. Average people won't care. Only data science people will have a problem with it.
Got you. Thank you.
Yeah. Tara, did you have a hand raised? I saw.
I did. So I just want to be honest. I have not used AI as far as a generative one at all. I mean, I played around with the ones of the pictures on Facebook that got popular, but that's it. So I don't have much experience. You kind of hit on in before, and I haven't because in my mind, I heard people talk about it, and I was like, well, no technology is gonna be better than me. Like I want to be original. I want to be authentic and this and that. And so that's why I took this training, because I just didn't know enough about it to trust it. But I'm so glad I'm hearing you, because now I see that, like you said, you can use it as an assistant.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of hit on this earlier about how the AI will kind of take on your characteristics. So I just want to make sure I understand that correctly. Like once I create an account and I have my assistant, like it will build off of like, will it?
Yeah,
I don't want to ask this.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. So we're going to cover that a little bit in the prompting. So it'll know, it's not going to learn and take on your voice, but you're going to give it in the prompt, you're going to tell it the tone to take. You're going to say, here's my style. Here's how is it business professional? Is it kind of snarky? Is it sassy? Is it, you're going to have to tell the model. And then within that conversation, it'll remember that's the tone you want. But every time you kind of start a new prompt, then it starts from scratch. You're gonna have to tell it that tone again.
Got it. Okay, thank you. That answers my question perfectly.
Great.
And this is Pam again, and I will add to Tara is I use the same like chat with it in the chat GPT, and then I will just reference, based on information, in this chat, and then it will pull information that's already there. And so I found that it
Wow.
remembers my tone and my style so that it generates what I need. So I found it
Okay, love
helpful that way
that.
too.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Pam.
and that's when
Okay.
when I talk about a conversation, and if we have time at the end, and I can stay late too, we'll go through and show how you, when you put it in, if you're in that same conversation or same chat, like Pam's saying, then it's going to remember that first instruction you gave it about tone and style. At some point though, like if you start a new conversation or a new chat, you'll have to tell it again. It won't remember from a different chat to this chat over here that you want the same style. But when you're in that same thread, it'll remember back, and you can always say, okay, in the same style as I told you before, or whatever, you can reference it back if you need to. Sometimes when the context gets too long in the same chat, that's where it kind of, we'll talk about that. That's where it kind of forgets and loses its way a little bit. And you have to kind of re-prompt it with, okay, my style is sassy and upbeat or something.
Right,
Then
right.
then it's like, okay, it kind of resets it. If it kind of starts losing its memory, it's a long, we'll talk about that. But yeah, that's a
Okay.
great point. Good job. Thank you,
you.
Pam, for adding in. All right, any others, or we can go on? All right. So now we're going to get into prompts. So what is a prompt? A prompt is really that text input into the AI model, and that's huge. Having that user interface layer on top, that makes it easy for the average person to go in there and use the model without having to write code. I mean, that's like a game changer. That's really why you hear in the last couple of years all this about Gen AI, because that prompting on that built on top of that model is really, that's changed the game essentially. And it's written in a plain natural language. You don't have to know coding. You don't have to know any SQL or JavaScript or whatever. It's just like, hey, here's how I'm talking to a human. Here's how I would put into the AI, which is so incredible. What you need to have though in that prompt is kind of a structure. So think about, you're telling the model, because it doesn't know anything about you. You're telling the model what's important, what are the key things it needs to remember and think about, or make sure that it keeps in mind when it's creating the output. And then you're telling it what you want the output to be. So you're giving it very specific framework. You're not just saying something so open and general, because it'll give you something, but it may not be at all what you want, because you didn't give it the guardrails, and it'll come up with something. It's always going to give you a response, but it may not be what you want. So again, think about, like, if you're giving instructions to an assistant, you can't just tell an assistant, hey, write me an email, or hey, write me a sales email. Like, okay, I'll just write you a random sales email, and it won't be at all what you want it to be. So you would want to say, write me a sales email about this this product that's going to start here and end here, and it's going to be this you have to kind of give it, it's going to be aimed at this target, you're going to give it the structure around, and then it'll create the sales email based on the guidelines that you give it. If you look down here, we can go into, this is ChatGPT, but at the bottom, the prompt is really just a text box. So if you can see on my screen down there at the very bottom, that's where I made it a little larger, but really when I say prompt, it looks like a text box, and you just type in the information into that, and you click like enter, and then it feeds what gets into the model, and then it responds back. But you want to think of these prompts as conversations. And I think Pam kind of touched on this too, where, it's a chat. So think about it. You start with the original, you ask it questions, it asks you questions, you go back and forth in a conversation, which seems very weird that you're doing that with a computer, model, but it's the best way to kind of give, because you need to refine and reiterate what it gives you and kind of focus it. If it's not quite right, you can say, well, those are good, but maybe I need 3 more ideas, or or build out on this one idea. Like, can you expand further on that? So you're going to go back and forth like you would an assistant, like, oh, that was a good point, let's go further into that, or no, this wasn't quite right, let's not do that. Or here, you're going to kind of go back and forth, like, and think about these prompts as being kind of building blocks. Like, when you write a letter, you have a structure, you have the header and the salutation and the body and the conclude, and the little signature and all that. So there's like a very set structure to a letter. With these prompts, there's a set structure to the prompt to make sure that you're giving the model what it needs to give you back what you need out of the model. And we're going to kind of cover so it is a structured format, these prompts. If you just leave it open in general, it's just going to give you something, but it won't be right. So having a prompt structure will still let you be flexible and adaptable in that structure. It still gives you freedom to explore and tailor it to your business, but it's going to give you a much better result by having that structure in the prompt. So I'm calling this the PCAR format. It's just because it helps me remember like everything, like an acronym. So when you think about the prompt, so we're going to talk about a prompt pattern. You'll hear this a lot. If you take any kind of Gen AI course or training, they're going to talk about prompts and prompt patterns. And the pattern is just that structure. So you make sure that you kind of have, there's some key things to put in there so you can get the best information out. The first one's persona. So you need to define the role of what you want the model to be. What do you want the model to act like? So it has to know who it is, which just sounds very weird. It has to know who it is to know how to respond back. And it's going to provide, again, these are all guardrails or kind of help it provide the right context back to you. So, and one of that is like, act as if you're a B2B marketer. You don't want to say, B2B marketer is even more specific than act as if you're a marketing manager. If B2B, can you act as if you're, an email content specialist in marketing? Like you want to give it who it needs to respond. It's the expert. So if you're gonna ask it to give you information as that persona, then you've got to tell it who it needs to be. So like Pam, you were saying, you need to probably say, I need a website copy for this type of business and this type of, service or whatever. Like you had to tell it who it needed it to be able to give you information back. Then the other thing is context. So again, you're going to add on additional details, experience, backgrounds, target audience, things. Again, you're not going to say, act as if you're a B2B marketer, write me an email, a marketing email. That's not helping it any way. It doesn't know what, it'll write you an email, but it won't be what you want. So you want to add additional layers on top of that. So, it's about, you want to focus on email generation or lead nurturing. You want to talk about email newsletters, so you want to provide more context around what you want the model to, the output that you're looking for. And you will even can put in there, you write to personal trainers, or you're writing for a certain type of audience, or I'm trying to think, any of your customers, you can put in, this would be an email newsletter aimed at X. That'd be another way to add in the people that you're targeting this content to. The next thing is action. You have to tell it what you want it to do. So you want it to write a blog post or give me a list or create an outline. And I want it to be X number of, I want it to be bulleted list or 1,200 characters or aim for LinkedIn. And I was telling no emojis because good Lord, I don't know why it does, but when I put it in there, it wants to put emoji into everything. And I'm like writing for LinkedIn, like I don't want emojis in my LinkedIn. Maybe I want emojis in somewhere else, but I don't know. So for me, I'm always putting it and no emojis, like just none, because I don't want those. So that might be, write a blog post. Oh, I have to move my little screen. Write a blog post about this, about the importance of a newsletter in your overall marketing strategy. And here's where you put in like the tone. Business professional casual, might be sassy and upbeat. It might be, don't use emojis, use emojis, especially if you like emojis. And then max length. So those are all things you're telling it who it needs to be, kind of what's the experience and background of that. So just a B2B marketer may not tell you, but hey, you have experience in this area. I want you to write a blog post with these things around about formatting or tone or word length and all that kind of stuff. And then you're going to refine and reiterate. So it's going to spit back something out to you, but you're going to go, well, that's maybe not right. You may not, you're going to tweak it. You're going to ask it to regenerate. You're going to say, yeah, that's okay. Focus more on this aspect versus this, or, ask it to rewrite the blog post. Or you're going to ask it to say, okay, now give me 3 tweets based on this post, or give me this. Or then you take that content, you add your own personal, you would then take that content it gives you. It's not the final, it's going to be that first draft. And then you can kind of tweak it, make it your own, and adding your own experiences or customer stories or whatever to kind of fill out and make that content your own and not just AI generated, but again, getting that kind of first generation. So oh yeah, so you have it take that blog post and maybe you're like, wow, this would be a really good kind of webinar. So maybe you write a webinar description, for this. Maybe you write a good hook, like a title. Maybe you have a blog post and you wanted to write, give me 10, kind of different titles. I could name this blog post and it'll give you different ones. And you could say, oh, I wanted to be, like a certain tone to the title. You could be really, like, I don't want to say clickbaity, but you want something that has a little more sizzle or a punch or something a little more professional or something. You could have it like give you different tones that kind of go along in different title ideas. So there's all different ways you can use, but again, knowing you have to tell it who it needs to be. You have to tell it what experience that you have or background or expertise or like who you're aiming this for, if they have a specific customer in mind. Then you need to tell what you want it to do. I need this, I don't want this, kind of in there. And then you've got to be prepared to reiterate and refine and kind of keep tweaking the model. Because again, first time's never perfect. Or you may go, well, that's great, but maybe this one section is what I really want to, let's hone in on that and build that out more. Or then you can kind of take it and then kind of repurpose it into different, when you get to final one, you could always take it, put it back in a chat GPT or any model. And then say, hey, now here's my final copy. Give me the 3 social media posts and the 5 tweets and the workshop description, once you have a final. So then it'll take you the stuff you've added, the content you've added into it, personalized it, and build that out into your social media posts and marketing copy. All right, so let's some examples of that. So within that prompt pattern, there's 2 different personas that I say are really pretty powerful for businesses, essentially. There's the expert persona and there's the audience persona. So you can either have the model be the expert. So if you had a problem, like who would you go to for the answer? That's the expert. So it's, you're the B2B marketer, you're the personal trainer, you're the financial consultant, you're the expert. And then you don't know what the expert's going to say, but you're going to ask them for their opinion or advice. You're going to ask the model as the expert, act as if you're this, write about this, or what are the 10 questions, 10 top things you would say about X, or, whatever the output is, the model's going to respond as that expert. So they can be a stand-in for you as the expert. They can say, hey, act as if you're WordPress developer and what would be the top 10 things somebody might ask you when designing a website. I don't know what it is, but you're asking it to give you back, because sometimes as the expert you forget what it's like to be a beginner. So the model can be really good to helpful, like, oh, if I was starting out, or if I had questions for the first time, or if I was redesigning my website, what would I ask, or what are the things I should be asking about? So you can then write content around those top questions that somebody's asking that you may have forgot because you're the expert. You don't realize, what do you mean they don't know about, the different platforms, or they don't understand what WordPress, .org and WordPress.com is? Like, what do you mean you don't know that? Like, they know, but the average person doesn't. So again, that's that expert persona. So we're going to kind of look at a couple of those. So an expert persona might be act as if you're a personal financial planner. So I'm asking, you're setting up the model to be that personal financial planner. And you're saying, hey, model, this is what you want to do as the expert. You want to grow your business by establishing yourself as a thought leader. You're targeting professional women in their 30s. You want them to start planning for retirement. So you're giving all that context around not just saying personal financial planner, write me a blog post. You're saying, I need something targeted around this specific aspect of content that I want it to produce. And then you're saying, hey, give me 10 ideas on topics to write about for an online thought leader on LinkedIn. So I'm not just saying, I'm very much a tailored which platform. I'm saying, here's kind of what, I'm not trying to sell something. I'm trying to establish myself as a thought leader. So I'm telling it what I want it to do and what I want it to, for. And then you refine and reiterate. So you can ask it, you maybe don't like the 10 ideas and you can say, I don't like those, generate 10 more ideas. Or you may then say, I take these ideas and then create a 12-month marketing content calendar based on these ideas or based on these pillars. So you can ask it again, but it's still, because you're within that same, like Pam was saying, within that same conversation or chat, it remembers that you're asking it to be a personal financial planner. It's remembering that you're targeting professional women in their 30s, so it remembers those in that same, you don't have to then go back and say, you're a personal financial planner, you're looking to grow your business and you want to talk to women in their 30s, create a 12-month marketing calendar. It's going to remember in that same chat or same conversation that that's who the model is supposed to be. Again, if you want to change and do a different persona, you need to start a different prompt or a different conversation or chat, because because it's going to keep thinking it's a personal financial planner aimed at women in their 30s, professional women in their 30s. If you want to now change to a different target audience or something, you need to start a different prompt. Another example is, there's the personal trainer one. So say you're a personal trainer, you specialize in creating fitness programs for women during pregnancy and post-pregnancy. You're looking to grow your business by creating a small group coaching program with this target audience. So I gave it who you're supposed to be. What's your persona? You're an expert personal trainer. But here's what you do. You're not just a general personal trainer. You create online fitness programs, women in pregnancy, post-pregnancy. You want to create a small group coaching program. Then it's give me an outline for that 8-week coaching program. And then I'm also saying target at women during the last part of their pregnancy. Again, pregnancy is 9 months. Do you want to do a coaching program for 8 weeks and 9 months? Like, no, you need to focus on where in that 9-month window you want to target that coaching program. And then you can say, give me a 4-week program, maybe post-pregnancy. Maybe it's getting your fitness back after pregnancy. Maybe it's, maybe it's balancing exercise and caring for a newborn baby. So there's different ideas that you can then, again, it remembers you're a personal trainer, remembers that you're specializing in women in pregnancy, and it's going to, then you can kind of asking it within that same conversation or chat about variations and ways you can kind of build on different content ideas. The other persona pattern is going to be an audience persona. So that's the experts. You're asking the model to take on the persona of an expert. This one, you're going to ask the model to take on personas of your target customer, your target audience. So again, it's different. It's similar structure, but you're going to ask it to be different people, I guess, different personas. So this is where you want the model to say, what would my target, this is where you're going to ask what your target audience, you're going to ask them, what questions do they have? It's going to take on that role. Again, based on everything it knows about that target audience, when you ask it questions, it's going to say, well, if I was this target audience, here's how I respond, or here's the things questions I would ask, or here's the, kind of coming at it from that perspective versus coming from the expert's perspective. And again, it helps, like I said earlier, with that curse of knowledge. So sometimes as experts, we forget what it's like for people in the beginning, just starting out, or people doing something for the first time, or they may have experience in one area, but this is a new area for them. You can help kind of figure out where that target person is and their mindset at that time versus kind of assuming they know. I'm sure they know that, don't they? Like, no, probably not. You may not realize that they don't know some things because you're so used to, it's so ingrained for you as the expert, you forget that your target audience may not know those things. So this was going to be more like assume you're this target persona and then explain or, help me, what are the top questions or you know, what are the things, how would I, you know, how would I explain something to that type of person, to that target audience? It'll make sense here in a minute as I do some examples. So this is kind of a funny one, but so you're saying, hey, assume that you have no background in computer science. Explain how large language models work. So you're like going, okay, you're saying model, take on the persona of somebody like the average person, no background in computer science. How would you explain how large language models work if you're that kind of average person? And it'll give you back, well, this is the tone here, and it will give you it's funny because it'll change its language based on who that target audience is, that persona it takes on.
This is important stuff.
And then here's a kind of funny one. I took this from somebody, but it was a good one, so I'm using it. I asked permission, it's okay. But it's like, assume I'm Christopher Columbus. Explain how large language models work. You know, it's like going, well, wait a minute, how would I tell somebody from the 1400s, like how LLMs work? And you don't have to tell it who Christopher Columbus is, because it's going to know that. And like when you do an audience persona, if you say professional women in their 30s, you know, you don't have to give you don't have to go into all the details of their life. It's going to kind of know.
God, this stuff stinks.
Professional women in their 30s.
Smells like ass in there.
So it's going to kind of know, it's going to know what that, you know, it's going to know who Christopher Columbus is and kind of know, and it'll talk very different in a very different language. It'll use different words and terminology based on a 1400 guy in the 1400s and try to explaining it to them. Or you can do like, hey, I'm a second grader and I get bored. How to explain how these models work to me. So again, you can take the same ask, but you're putting it in different persona, different audiences, and it'll give you, the model will come back and say, oh, well, this is how I would tell explain to a second grader about how, and it'll use much different language aimed at that target audience. So again, it can help you make sure that your language and how you talk is tailored to that target audience, and you're not speaking, because sometimes as experts, we kind of, again, using terminology, and we use things that you may not realize that they don't have the base foundation in, because you're kind of speaking not above them, but you're speaking at a higher level that they're not ready for yet. They'll get there eventually, but they're kind of here, depending on where your audience is. So another example, oops. Oh, what happened there? What did I just do? Oh, don't know. I was moving the screen, and sorry about that. So then there was like, assume that you're a 30-year-old woman with no background in exercise science or physics. This is back to the personal training. So then if you were somebody that's an average woman, 30 years old, maybe you do a little bit of, they're going to kind of assume, oh, she understands something about like working out, but how do I explain the role of recovery? As a personal trainer, I maybe, and I've worked with some personal trainers, and they get very much in the weed, very technical, and they explain all the back. I'm like, I'm an average person. I don't need to know deloads and offset and recovery times and blah, blah, So how do you explain it to me as the average person? So you can kind of help that expert get back to, okay, maybe they don't need all that information yet. They're here, and at some point they'll be here, and I can talk to them about that, but I need to kind of adjust my language. It could be maybe you're talking to a college student and they are in an exercise science program. How would you explain recovery to them? Because they may know a little bit more about the technical and the back end aspects. Well, where would you fit that in? Or say you're a 7th grader and you're just starting to play sports. Then how would I explain recovery to that type of persona? So again, it's the same ask, like you're saying, explain to me this, but because it's different personas, different audiences, your how you say it, what you say, and the language and wording you use will be very different for those. So if you have different target audiences, this is where it'd be great if you had, I know some businesses or some people sell products or services to businesses, and they sell products and services to consumers, and their messaging needs to be different. This is a great way to kind of say, well, I would say it this way for this audience. It might be the same thing you're saying, the same, the importance of email newsletters to your business, but I'm going to say it differently to a business owner or a business person, somebody that's using it for their business versus somebody that's a consumer. And, you know, they're gonna have a different message to those two different customers. I have one more. So then, so you can, like, say if you're a first time dog owner, you can ask them, what are the 3 most common questions that you have about potty training? You're like, well, what would somebody ask? Like, what are the most, and then you can write blog posts or write content around those to answer those questions. But you may go, I can't remember the last time, you know, like, what do they ask? What are the, or you're just starting out in business and you're like, I'm not sure what the 3 most common questions might be. That helps you generate content if you're kind of getting started, or if you've been down the road so long, you're like, wait, people don't know the basic stuff about potty training. I'm sure they do. Like, no, they don't. It may be a homeowner in the US who want to remodel my bathroom. What are the steps I need to take to get started? So, and those are great. So you can say, if somebody's out there searching for, I want to remodel my bathroom, you know, what's involved, your posts about the steps and the process and how to work with the contractor can all be content you can generate based on this kind of prompt that the response that the model gives you. And then here's another one, you know, maybe I'm getting married for the first time. What's the 5 tips when hiring a caterer? Then you can write content that answers that question. And so then that'll help you with people coming to your site and finding you, or with search engine optimization, all the stuff in your marketing. It gives you, hey, these are questions that somebody might, if that's my target, you know, things I can do to help them, as well as at the same time, showing my knowledge and experience as a wedding planner. All right, so that's really questions kind of on that before I go to the next section.
Hi, this is Kathy, and I've got a question.
Sure.
I'm really enjoying the presentation. Thank you. You've got this format of the prompt where you say, assume that in one sentence, and then the second sentence is kind of what the request is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just curious, why is it that you don't put it all into one sentence? So for example, instead of saying, assume that I'm a first-time dog owner, you know, what are the, 3 tips that would be most beneficial for housebreaking or potty training? Why are you doing it that way versus saying all in one sentence of what are the top 3 tips for a new dog owner to, help with, housebreaking or potty training? Why are you doing it in 2 sentences?
You can totally do it in one. It's just more
Okay.
to make sure that you, and you'll kind of, these things will, it's still, I can like say, make sure that you have a persona, you have a context, you have an action, you have refine and reiterate. So sometimes if you smush them all in one, you might forget one of the parts, or you aren't clear on one of the parts. So it's just easier to teach a workshop is saying, make sure you've got this one, make sure you've got this one, make sure you got this one.
Yes.
But it can totally be squished into one sentence. It won't matter to the model.
And then the other question I had was, and I know that you addressed this a little bit, but like to be very specific about tone. So you tell it, you can say, this is the tone that I want to use. So if like I've been using it just a little bit, and it might generate something for me. And then it's just ChatGPT, the free version that I'm using, which also might be another thing. I think I've got to move maybe to a different version. I think maybe to get a little bit more benefit. But so it'll give me the answer, right? And then, in this refinement, that you rephrase and refinement, I'll say to it, okay, I like the content of the reply, but please rephrase it in a more relaxed and informal style, right? So then it'll give me something else. And I guess my question is it also learning and determining its response back to me based upon how I engage with it with my language? So for example, if I would say, I like that, but I need something to be more, more informal. Please give me a 200-word version that is more relaxed and informal in style. Would I get a response one way versus saying just real crisp, do it again in an informal and relaxed style? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Does the response to me change depending upon the way in which I phrase it?
No. That's a short answer.
Really?
Yeah, so what happens is it's gonna take the words informal, relaxed style, even if I do give me this versus can you give me some, can you provide versus give me 3 blog posts? Can you provide me 3 blog posts? One's a little nicer, one's a little more direct. It doesn't really matter to the model. It won't be more crisp in response because I say give me versus can you provide? It's going to go that what you're telling it. Now, what can happen with the model is if you start being very abusive language to the model, and being the model can, I've never had it happen because I'm not abusive to the models, but when you start using certain language that's maybe very crass or cuss words or, it'll start thinking that that's what you want it to be. If you don't give it any tone or style, it'll start saying, oh, you're going to you like that kind of language and I'm going to give that back to you. If you don't kind of give it a tone or style, but if you give it a tone or style, it's going to follow that no matter how you direct or indirect or soft or hard you say this sentence. Does that make sense?
Well, a little bit, but I guess I'm a little confused
Yeah.
because when you say unless you give it a tone or style, if you start speaking in an abusive or a crass way, it's going to, model that in the response to
Well,
you.
Yeah, because, and I guess I should say that, well, I guess you can ask the model it's probably not really, you're probably right in the sense that usually people are asking the model to be that way. So if you use cross language and you say, hey, model, I want you to use that same kind of language back to me. So you're right. It's really not, they're usually actually putting in there, maybe, yeah, they're actually saying, I want the model to kind of be that way. Yeah, sorry.
Because I've seen demonstrations of this in 2 ways. I've seen instructors give prompts that say, give me 10 examples of problems that a new college student would have. So it'll be very direct. Give me 10 examples, right? And then another instructor will say, please give me 10 examples of problems that a student might have. So one might use please, and the other person will say they'll just give the command. And I guess I'm just wondering, does putting courtesy in there the way that I would talk to another person, actually, like if I had a person in my office, like you were saying, like an assistant, right? I actually wouldn't say, give me 10 examples. I would say, please go work on this and come back with 10 examples. Like I would be courteous. And I guess what I'm wondering is, will the generation, include those kind of courtesies? Like, will it include that type of language back, or is it not?
Not really. So one could use, like the 2 of you could use, 2 different people could use the give me, the same exact give me, and still get something a little different from the model because there's still randomness in the model and how it responds back. And sometimes, yeah, it's not going to affect the model that much. But then the joke kind of in AI is that you always want to be nice to the model. You're like, well, why be nice to the model if it doesn't really matter? I think that's just because you want it to be conversational. You don't want it to feel like you want it to have it ask questions, give it information, and to be a conversation. And it's hard to do that sometimes if you're being very, but a lot of times I'll just say, give me 5 posts and it'll give me the 5 posts, in this language, in this tone or style. And it doesn't seem to make any difference. I think if you didn't, I think it's just trying to be nice to the model. And again, we don't know what's happening on the inside of the black box, and it's trained on natural language. So could it affect it at some point? I will say that we'll talk a little about biases in the model. So it's going to be more how the model is trained on bias versus you're not really going to, by saying please or give, probably won't affect the model that much. But if you were saying, I need you to be aggressive in tone and very direct and, respond back. But even if I said, please give me a very aggressive, direct, no nonsense response, even if I say please and, could you, it's going to give me an aggressive, direct, because that's what you asked for the response to come back like.
Okay.
I understand what you're saying, but it's your language choice. But it's funny because we always say be nice to the model and be courteous to it because we're having a conversation and you want to be courteous. So I think it's probably a little bit of people like putting on top of that, whether it actually affects the model or not. I can't say on the back end because we're not sure. We just know that like you want to have a conversation, so you want to treat it like you're having a conversation with a person because it's easier for people to understand that versus trying to go back and forth with a model versus saying it's just a dumb computer and and not because it's not, it's learning but it's learning on the training data. And it's learning from you, but it's learning only what you want it to do. It's not really training on and it's one thing people are scared about putting information into the model. We're not sure how much it's training on the information you're putting in versus training on the data set that it was at the beginning. I'm not answering your question very well at all, Kathy. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Because, I feel really ridiculous.
But I wouldn't worry about
typing
you say please versus give.
Right.
As long as you use language that tells it what you want it to output to be and how you want it to respond. That's going to be key as opposed to versus you saying please or give me 10 versus can you do this for me? Because I would tell an assistant sometimes, hey, I just need you to give me 10 of these. Sometimes you just say that to them versus like doing the please. So and your style as a person, like I'm more direct. So I would make sure that, hey, in the assistant I did, I'm just more of a direct person versus, and I would just say, hey, maybe you say, can you do this for me? But sometimes I might just say, hey, can you I need you to do these 3 things for me. Thanks. So it's your style too. And how you interact with the model, but it's not, as long as you give it the style that you want the prompt or you want the response to be, it's going to follow that versus your language.
Okay.
in the
Yeah, that
prompt.
makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much.
I don't know if that helped or not.
Hey, this is Pam. I think even adding with that,
So we're gonna talk a little bit about context links, and I think this comes back to some of the other previous discussions about the model. There's a fixed amount of content it can remember at one time. So when I say remember in quotes, meaning, it's not really memory, but it's easy for us to kind of think about that in terms of like how long it can hold the thread of the conversation or the chat before it kind of starts forgetting and not remembering, because there's a context link. For ChatGPT, the 3.5 version, which is the free, it's about, they call it in tokens. Again, this is a whole data science thing, and I wish they had never done these tokens because no one understands what that means. But tokens are just like bits of words. They're not a whole word, because in our head, we want to think, oh, one word should be a token. It's not. It's like a long word might have 3 tokens and a short word have 1 token. But generally, again, it's not exact, but generally the free version is about 4,000 tokens, which is about 3,000 words. Again, it's hard to say how the program, the model breaks up a word into, it may break up word up into 3 tokens or 4 tokens. We don't really know. It's just how it does it. But in general, it's about 3,000. For the ChatGPT 4, which is the paid version, it's longer. So because you pay more, you can get a little longer context length, which is about 8,000 tokens. Again, about 6,000 words generally. Each model is going to have its own limit. And you have to, when you sign up, you can look in there and it'll tell you how many tokens, and just then Google like how many tokens is kind of how many words for that model. But every model is going to have a max content length. And that's just within that chat though. That's within the one conversation or chat. Again, if I start over, my content context length starts over and resets. It's going to be, again, that's why people like the Anthropic Claude model. It's got a much longer context length. I think the paid version of Claude is like 200,000 tokens. So you can put many, many more pages of text in there or words before the model kind of like forgets, like it just can't handle all that in its memory. So that's why the Claude is really popular for some people are doing kind of like much longer content, and they need to put a much bigger amount into the model. But every single model has it. Is there, and why does context length matter? Because this is when you hear about hallucinations in chat, and any model, they'll say, oh, it's hallucinated. Oh, what happens is if you start exceeding that conversation beyond that, and you don't kind of reprompt the model, kind of have it remember again, it just forgets. It just can't hold all that conversation in its memory. So that's what happens. It loses the thread of the conversation. So it'll just start making up stuff, or it'll think you're like, I told you to be this type of persona, and it'll just start, giving you responses, but you're like, this is not at all what I asked for up here. So that means when you get hallucinations that it's forgotten the thread of that conversation. So if you want to keep in that same chat or same conversation, you've got to kind of reprompt, say, okay, remember, you are a personal finance consultant, blah, 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 and kind of reset that persona and expertise and that base, and then you can start asking questions again. So again, that's why you need to hear about hallucinations, is people are putting in super long, it's just exceeding what the model can deliver at one time. Again, also with content length is that you can't put super long documents in. You're not going to put in, like a whole chapter of a book into ChatGPT. You might be able to do that in Claude and ask it to summarize, but you wouldn't be able to do that in ChatGPT because it's just not going to, Claude's going to have it's just that model. That paid version is much longer, that you can put a bigger block of text in, and it'll remember the whole text. And then that means if you were doing a big long block, you'd have to put in, if you're in a model that can't handle it, you need to put in you have to put sections in. Or here's the introduction, or here's the body, or here's the conclusion. If it's too long, then you have to kind of build those sections. You could put them in there and ask questions about each section, but you couldn't say, take the whole document at once and ask questions about the whole document at one time. So just touching on copyright and legal concerns. Again, not a lawyer, so we're just going to kind of do it from the layperson's perspective. So that's why I'm saying, if you just were to take, I think your biggest concern or biggest risk, again, it's your choice and your risk, but is if you take what the model just spits back out to you and you just copy paste and use it as is on any of your stuff. So again, not adding any modifications or personal experiences or rewriting it or taking section, modifying that content. If you just, again, cases are going to court now. We have no idea. The genie's out of the bottle. We're not going to be able to put Gen A back in. And so they're going to have to build legal. Each case is going to have to build that case law, but it's going to have, it's out. So there's no way to stop it or stuff it back in and put a bunch of rules on top of it. Each case is going to kind of have to build a case law. But I think if you take that as a first draft and then you add your experience, expertise, personal stories, tone, style, all that kind of things on top of it, and you're modifying it, then you're less risk of any kind of a copyright infringement. I would say never upload any proprietary information into the model, just because we don't know. We know models are trained at a certain date. And I think it's kind of like what Kathy's question is, are they learning on the things that we put in? People are very concerned that it's still learning on all the input things that we put into, that we ask the model. We don't know that for sure. We're told it stopped at a certain date and that it's not learning on the new stuff, but you just never know. And I would never put anything personal or proprietary into a third party model. A lot of big companies now are building their own LLMs behind their own firewalls for their people to use. So they can put proprietary data in for the company, but it's a closed system with, you know, in their own, it's not a third party. It's like, you know, Facebook and all those, you put stuff out there, it's a public platform. It's a third party platform. They're doing what they want with the data. You have no control over it. So you just never know for sure what they're doing with the LLMs. It's not as, I think, as risky as Facebook, but we just don't want to put stuff in there. It is trained on historic context, so there is some bias. That's the big thing that, especially on the image AI generators, you'll see a lot of bias. They, like people put prompts in, give me a picture of a business executive, you know, in the United States, blah, blah, blah. And the model always comes back with white men, you know, so that's an inherent bias in the model. It seems to be much more on the image side that it won't have the diversity in there because it's, again, because unfortunately, a lot of this content out there is from a certain perspective or certain hasn't been always that diverse in the past, and it's learning on content that's out there in the public domain. So it may not always be as diverse as we want it to be. So again, that's where the prompt going in would have to help with knowing that that diversity needs to maybe kind of be added into the prompt. And that's usually more images, but you have to know it's also, we've heard things on the, you know, language side and text side, there could be just kind of making sure that you look at anything for, you know, being written, considering current times and current philosophies and diversity and getting all different kinds of voices into the content versus just kind of one perspective. The other thing is regulatory. So you might be in an industry that is very much like, we aren't touching AI right now until we figure out how we're going to establish it. So it is kind of funny. And some like universities are being like, oh, none of our students can, if they do an AI, anything with AI, they're immediately like, to write a paper, they're immediately like kicked out or whatever. They're being zero, you know, zero. And then others are like, well, let's see how we can use it with students and be, you know, how they can responsibly use the tool. Again, it's just a tool in their classroom. You might be in healthcare or legal field or something. I've heard of lawyers actually getting in trouble because they're using Gen AI to write briefs and do things, and they're asking it. This is where you shouldn't ask it to be a resource. They're asking it for case law, and the AI is bringing back cases. It's like making them up. It's like, you know, okay, you want a case? I'll make up a case, and they're not going back and fact checking that the case was actually a real case and accurate. So different fields are like, wait a minute, you guys need to put some guardrails in place for different industries on how professionals can use the tool. And if there's ever a concern, you can always add a disclaimer like, you know, I don't, if you come up with your own content and then you use the model to like fact check or to grammar and edit and that kind of stuff, it's up to you whether you want to add a disclaimer saying, you know, edited and proofread by AI or something, you know, or and I know like authors, this is a big thing on Amazon. So Amazon has a thing now where if you upload a book to Amazon as an author, you have to check whether you used AI in different ways, like AI generated, meaning AI wrote the book, or AI assisted, meaning, you know, you might have used AI to get started as a draft and then you add it on, or you used AI as a grammar editing, you know, as an editor, proofreader kind of check. So there's different things people are having to disclose, and whatever you feel comfortable with. You know, if you had an assistant help you write an article, maybe you put, you know, assisted by AI versus, you know, it's not, again, you're adding your own voice on top of it. So you still own that content because it's still your ideas and thoughts, and it's providing that kind of first draft. But if you had somebody else kind of write a first draft and you're like, you had a stable of writers and somebody wrote the first draft and then you wrote the second or third, would you still say you're the author, or do you say, you know, both of you are the authors? It's up to you. Any questions, of course, consult a lawyer. You can always add a disclaimer created with AI assistance or something if you were concerned about that, or if that's important for your target market to know that. You can run your text that AI provides back to you through what they call a copyright or plagiarism checker. Those are standalone tools. Some are integrated, like some programs, like Grammarly, I think, has a content copyright plagiarism checker in its own platform in the paid version. I think Jasper might as well. So some of the ones that are more tailored to kind of grammar, punctuation, spelling, and editing kind of that side might, they're aimed more like authors and people kind of writing that type of content, usually have a copyright or plagiarism checker in there. Again, the key thing is don't use whatever the content comes back as is. You know, just if you just, again, we don't know how the legal is going to shake out, but if you just copy and paste the exact same thing out of AI and you use it verbatim, that's going to be a higher risk. You don't know what that risk is versus adding and changing and modifying it and tailoring it to your own voice and experience and background. And then again, never use it for fact checking. So if you were to ask it for resources or wanted to use it for research, check every single link, check every single thing that it gives you, because it's not necessarily going to provide accuracy in facts, or, you know, just trying to check any stats or things that it gives you. If it gives you some kind of stats, then ask for the source and then go try to find it and see if it's accurate or not. So just kind of wrapping up, we're getting close. So hallucinations, just make sure. And when it does hallucinate, man, it'll sound like it's super confident. Like it's not going to give you a, well, you know, I'm pretty sure this is right. Like it's going to sound like it's 100% right. And you're like, and then you have to use your own expertise. Oh, sorry, Kathy, I see your hand up. You want to do that? You have a question before we go on?
Yeah, I have a question. It's kind of related to what you were just talking about with legal, but it's not about the legal
I don't
ramifications.
hear anything. Maybe
Can you hear me now?
right. I see your hand up, but I don't see. Did you want to come off mute, Kathy? You're off mute, it looks like,
Right.
but I don't hear anything.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Maybe type in the chat. I don't know if something's wrong with the audio.
I can hear Kathy. I don't know about
Okay.
anybody else.
But we're almost to the end, and then I'll open for questions.
Yeah, I can hear
go
her
on.
too.
So yeah, so you just need to fact check it and then use your own expertise. And it sounds like sometimes it'll think you're like, well, yeah, in general, but maybe that's not my experience, or that's not quite how I put, you know, you're like, you need to say, based on what I know, yeah, that might be the prevailing thought, but maybe I have a unique spin or twist or angle on that. So you want to add that in versus like well, most people say this, but I say this, or you can, you know, add that your own voice onto any content that it comes back with. Again, just don't upload anything personal proprietary. It shouldn't be training on it. It says it's not training on it. We don't know that's the case for sure. And we don't ever want to take that risk for any proprietary information. Know that it's based on, you know, the way things worked historically. It's based on what's out there. Not everything that on the internet is real, and not everything is true, and not everything is accurate. So again, it's just looking at models of the language. It's not pulling like facts or saying this one's true and this one's not true for two different like things. It's just saying language and building that model on that structure. So, and again, it may not, it's going to say, well, the majority of the content is in this area, but it may not be representing all diversity of voices or representing maybe, because like if you'd asked the model, it stopped a ChatGPT 3.5 stopped in September 2021. So if you asked it something about COVID or something later, it may not, it may give you an answer, but not, it may be at all accurate because it kind of stopped learning kind of in the middle of COVID, maybe not post-COVID stuff. So that's kind of things where like, well, you might have to check with anything kind of contemporary that you're writing about something current or real time. The model may not be the best. It may give you, you know, may not be the most accurate, up-to-date information when it gives you the output. Again, it's a rough draft generator, not a final draft. You should never really kind of set it, you know, just use whatever it comes out with. it's not, again, it's not gonna be tailored or specific to your business. It'll sound like anyone could have written it. And if, anyone can write it, then what are you adding in value? You're just adding, are you adding more noise or are you adding more like valuable content? So just kind of be thinking it's a great tool, but we all know you have those content engines, you have those people that are just like, they just spitting out content, and you're like, but is it really helpful and valuable for your customers and for your business? So kind of always make sure that you want to bring your voice and experience and kind of who you are to any of your content versus, it just being kind of generic or well, anyone could have written it. It's not really reflective of you or your business. All right. I don't know if so I'm gonna check the chat really quick. Oh, you guys can hear Kathy? I can't hear it at all. We're going to Q&A. Oh, let's see.
Hungry.
Oh, so Kathy, hopefully this is your question. Could you please comment on the implications of AI generated content being suppressed by algorithms such as, well, that's because they have their own algorithms and their own AI. So Facebook has its own one. I can't think of what it's called now. If you use AI content, well, I was just pressing it. So that's where, so Facebook doesn't really know, or Google, that you're writing it from an algorithm. They just want you to use their tools instead of using ChatGPT or Claude and Google doesn't want you to go use Bing or, Microsoft's, and Microsoft doesn't want you to use Google's. So how they would know it's AI generated, I'm sure they're working on ways to figure that out. Just because they want you to use their platform instead. I think you can still, I think the big thing would be maybe if you flagged it as AI, that might be a thing if they start doing that. Like Amazon flag, you have to flag if you wrote a book using AI, and
You'll
it
have
will
to.
definitely, and that's the concern. No one knows what happens, what Amazon's doing with that flag. So the same thing might be if Google and Facebook, if they could somehow flag it, but I think if you just do a regular post, I don't know how they would know unless you flagged it as AI assisted, then they might have that flag and somehow suppress it in their algorithm. Or what they might do is if you used Facebook's AI and they could tell it you use Facebook's AI, like, in the platform, and you used it to create the post, they might actually more likely promote that versus, because they would know they could tie directly to their platform's AI and promote it. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on and a lot of, and then it's the legal question. Can they really suppress something else, another AI tool, when they have their own? Like that seems to, I think that would be challenged legally as well. If they said no AI at all, and they created a tool that could detect it somehow, because every time you detect, there's like that copyright plagiarism checker. So it's probably using something like that to try to see if you're plagiarizing or copywriting, maybe that, because I don't know how they would know and using that as a check. But if Facebook said, oh, we're not going to allow any AI on the platform, but our own AI is okay, then I think that would be a legal challenge that people would be all over them for. And again, but that takes time to go through the courts. Sorry, Kathy, I'm not really answering your questions very well today. Oh, the chat's disabled. I don't know why that would be. Oh, huh. Facebook AI, I can't remember what the name of their AI is. But you could probably, I say Google everything, but they're probably in the, either you could Google that or under like Facebook, like terms and services, they might have and it might all be open to business accounts and not personal accounts. Sometimes they do things like that where it's only, gosh, what is their AI called? I'm drawing a total blank. I could probably Google it. But you probably just Google and find the platform. Sometimes they roll them out like for businesses or not personal accounts. And sometimes they do pilots where only some people can get it, not others. So I'd have to check more into Facebook's. Because it's just tied to that platform, I kind of generally use the ones that are more platform agnostic. And they're more applicable to they're not tied to a specific platform. But I can look into that more. And it's a good question I can have ready for next time. Right. I don't know why the chat's disabled. Hopefully you can put things in the question or just come off mute if you've got questions. Or we can go and go into Chat GPT and look at some prompts. I don't know how much time we have left. Oh, we're almost at time, but I can stay for a few minutes if you guys want to kind of just run through the interface for some that haven't used it. Let's see. Oh, so that's where Tracy, the panelists, if you're a panelist or not. So panelists, if you're a panelist, got promoted panelist, accepted yes, you can go into the chat. If you did not accept promote to panelist, you can only put in the Q&A. Thank you, Tracy. All right. So, let me try to get out of here. So I do have. So this is Chat GPT. This is the free version. I try to always make sure because the paid versions inside everybody has access to it. What the paid gives you again is the longer context length, and it gives you, and most all paid versions will have longer context than our free version. And they, at least in Chat GPT and most paid versions, you get extra kind of plugins and extra functionality on top of it. Again, if you're starting out, use the free version. But then at some point you might want to step up to the paid version. I think Chat GPT is like $20 a month. Bing Copilot or Microsoft Copilot was like $30 a month last time I saw. But you get additional functionality and plugins and kind of templates and things on top of it that could be useful if you're going to start using it a lot. And then I think some of the other ones are just, they may offer a free trial and then they go to a paid version. I think Jasper's, I don't know what Claude is right now. I haven't checked their pricing lately, but you just usually get more functionality, templates, and context length on that. So just looking at Chat GPT down here is like the message prompt. I hope you can see my little mouse moving, but you're down here typing in there. And then literally you type it in and then you hit either the little up arrow, send message, or you hit enter and you can type one in. So here's some previous ones I did based on some of the prompts I had in the, let's see. Let's do women. I don't know. This is kind of some of the prompt I had. So this is the personal finance. So here's like ask if you're a personal financial planner, grow your business, women in their 30s. And then it kind of gives me, I said, give me 10 ideas on topics. So then it's just, I mean, literally it will spit out in seconds. It'll start spitting this out. And it gave me, here's 10 topics. And then I'm like, create a 12-month marketing calendar. Because again, I'm still in the same thread or same chat or same, I don't have to go back in there saying, you're a personal financial planner, you know, all that again, because it remembers, it's still within the context length and it'll remember that that's the persona that I'm asking it to be. And so here's saying, write me a marketing content calendar on these 4 pillars. And there's like, great. So here's this week 1, week 2, week 3. And what you could do is say, great, can you expand a little further on week 1? Like you could ask that as a refine or reiterate. You can say, let's build out more. I'm really interested in this week 2. Can you write me, you know, what are the 3 key points under week 2 under this one that I should put into my post about that? So then you can start having it build out from this outline to, you know, building out each one of these further into their own separate blog posts. Then I said, oh, here's a list of questions an inexperienced person might ask a financial planner. So I'm saying now I'm like a more general, like inexperienced person, still going to remember all the stuff before. It's like, oh, well, here's now I didn't tell it a limit, so it gave me 20. I could have told it 10, I could have told it 5, could have told it 50. I didn't give it any, and it kind of said, okay, here's 20 questions. that they would ask. So then again, each one of these, you could expand further and say, okay, let's take this one and build out this, the number one blog into a blog post with, or, and then you can start kind of building out that content from that structure. And then you can take that
No.
and start then repurposing it to different platforms, or then adding your
You
own
already watched
expertise and
something.
experience on top of that. So I don't know if that's helpful, or if you guys want to come up with one, if you have a prompt you want to put in, or you could do these same prompts when you get the, and because you may get a different, you will get a little bit different answer or response back when you try the prompts for yourself, just because you may tell it, you know, a different target audience, or you may, again, it's going to have some variation, just randomness in the model. It's not going to spit out the exactly same thing for me as it will for you, even if you put the exact same prompt in. What is it? Any other ones you want to see or questions? I know we're at time. Oh, wait, let me check the chat. Oh, Claude is $20 a month. Yeah, they're all kind of running in that $20 to $30 a month. I thought Copilot was a little high at $30 a month, but that's Microsoft for you sometimes. But oh, thanks, Julie. Thank you, Jay. Let's see. Okay, so let me go into the chat. No more questions in chat, same ones. So, all right. Are there any other questions? I know we're at time. I don't see any hands raised. I'm looking at everybody. All right. And like I said, this is a lot of information. Go in there, play around with it, kind of use those personas, look at the output you're getting, refine, reiterate. But it's just going to take a while. You have to play with it. And I could give you, like I said, and there'll be people out there, they're actually selling prompts. Like you can buy 1,000 prompts or 50 prompts or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, you still got to put in, again, they're preventing you a structure. And I mean, I gave you like 2 in those personas and then like that structure. There are 1,000. I've taken workshops when they talk about, there's like, they'll list 20 different types of structures or prompts that you can do. And some of them are very specific to like, because you can actually have it do coding. You can actually have it write software code. You can actually have the model do a lot of things. Like you can flip the interaction. You can, there's all different names for like structures. But I think the 2 I gave you are probably the best ones to kind of start with. And for business, some things are very specific to like, if you're a software coder or if you're in different industries. But I think that, just, you have to get in there and play with it and just kind of try it and see. And it's kind of amazing that what it can give you and give you that starting point to move forward. Let me go back to the chat. Oh, great, Jay. Okay. Yeah, you can totally LinkedIn me. Yeah, we talked about having a prompt too, like to do more prompting, because it's just so much information. But if you don't understand like the kind of foundation basics, it's hard to like jump in. Because I've taken some workshops too where people are just like, let's just go in there and like type some stuff. I'm like, wait, you don't even know like why you're typing in what you're typing in. Like I can randomly put in stuff, but then it's not necessarily going to be the best coming out, or it's just too much. Like, wait a minute, I need to have like a foundation level before I can, like Pam was great where she was saying, okay, let's ask that's a prompt pattern is to ask the model questions like back to you. Like before you start, you're saying, what are the things I should know about that? And that's again, like a level 2. And that's another prompt pattern that you can get to have people ask you or have it ask you questions. I'm trying to think, I did one recently with that and I was trying to remember the structure, but it was really interesting because you kept having it ask you questions. And it was like, and I need to add that to my thing next time as an example. Because it's like, oh, this is interesting. And it was asking me, because it helps you think about things you're missing. Basically, you're asking it to, like, what are the gaps or what are the things I'm missing here? Or what's the information I would need to know before I start this? And then it can provide you, well, you're going to need to know this, this, and this. Or you can have it saying, what's the information you would need? Well, and then it can go through and you can make sure you have everything. Like maybe you go to, before you go to get a web developer, what's all the information that a web developer is going to ask me? What, you know, they're going to ask you about this and this and this and this before you go talk to them. And then you're going to say, well, what information am I missing in this information? You know, it's really pretty cool. Oh, AI for software. Actually, they're all code. Which is kind of weird because I don't do coding, but when I see it, I'm just like, man, when you think of language, coding is a language. And so it's been trained on the script. So I've seen people like, I know nothing about coding enough. I know enough to know like HTML tags and basic stuff, but I've seen people put in like, you know, write me a SQL code to do this. And the model just spit out SQL coding. Now you have to check to make sure it's right or not. If it works, I don't know, but you can really almost ask it, you know, it's not going to, again, it's a context link. So you have to make sure you're asking for something that fits within that. You can't say like, write me a whole website of code probably, but you can say, you know, write me some code for this function and it'll write the code for you. Craziness. But I've seen ChatGPT do it. So I know if they can do it, they almost all can. Again, some might be better than others that are just like some programs are really just kind of focused on text and like authors and writing, you know, other ones, but like this one, you can put it in there. Let's see if there's anything else. All right. I think that's all my questions. Ooh, sorry, you all see my screen. But, and I don't see any hands raised. Checking out here. All right, well, thanks for coming out this morning. Like I said, there'll be somebody from the SCORE will be sending out the slides and then the recording later. So you can go back and watch it or look at the slides. Like I said, I give you examples on there. Just play around with those and put them in, just see what the model brings back to you. And then start tailoring, you know, those, again, you can, in your prompts will start kind of smashing together. And like I said, it didn't have to be exactly like I wrote it, but as long as you have those elements all in there and you go check, 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 check. I got everything in how you write it in one sentence or 3 paragraphs. Because sometimes you might want to provide a lot more context around the background or experience that you want the AI model to have. So you can kind of, I always say that giving it more information versus less is better. You know, the more you can provide it, the better it's going to give you the output and result that you want. And like I said, you're not going to give it so much that it's not going to be able to remember it or handle it. So, all right. Great. With that, I think we're done. Unless anybody wants to come off mute and say anything.
Thank you so
All
much.
right.
This
Thanks
was
everyone
this
this morning and appreciate your time. And
Thank you.
like I said, just start playing with it and figuring out how it works for you and understand what it can do and what it can't do. I think that's the key step. And then how to get, you know, good information in to get good information back out. You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.